Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Hello, sneakers, and welcome back to the podcast. I hope you're staying warm wherever you are right now because it is so cold here today that perhaps for the first time ever, my cat Bustifer did not want to go for his daily walk. Jesse, how are things in Tulsa?
Well, yesterday it was 70 degrees, and
Right.
today it feels like minus 15. So, normal February Oklahoma stuff.
Right, exactly. Hey, I got the cover for my next novel, Shameless. I mean, I don't have the book yet. That's why you're looking at the old one over my shoulder. But here's the cover for the next book in the Kinsey Rivera series, number 3. It's called Shameless. And let me just say that I love the cover, and that shattered mirror look is not random. It definitely ties into the story. That novel will be available for pre-order later this month and out in late March. Let me also mention that we continue to add more spectacular authors and agents and publishers, in fact, just added one today, to the roster for WriterCon 2022. In fact, we have so many fine presenters this year that we're adding nighttime programming, like night owl roundtable sessions where you can sit at a table and talk with people who know what they're talking about on various topics of interest. You remember, Jesse, on the last podcast, Elena Donnelly, when I asked her what's the best piece of advice you can give writers, she said, talk to other writers, network. And I really kind of took that to heart and started to look for more opportunities for people, including the speakers, the very experienced writers, but also people less so, to exchange ideas and ask questions and things that might make a critical difference to your writing career. So I'm programming in a lot of that in addition to all the speeches and the lectures and the pitch sessions and the chances to get manuscripts critiqued and all that kind of stuff. Now you can just sit down in the evening and have a snack and get whatever you didn't get already that day at nighttime at WriterCon. I mean, we already do so much. I don't even know where to start talking about it. Jesse, you were there last year. What was your favorite part?
Well, I mean, I loved doing the live podcast with you. That was great. And I feel like that would be the perfect thing to do at nighttime, more like later when everyone's had like a drink or two, like just to loosen up a little bit in like
Yeah,
maybe like a more I don't know, less classroomy type of space,
right, exactly.
And
Well, that's the
yeah.
idea of the nighttime sessions. It's a beautiful hotel. The area, the weather will probably be great, so we'll probably go outside. There's a hotel bar, like you were saying. We're going to have a sponsor who's going to provide snacks. That's Draft to Digital. Let me just drop their name because they're about to feature in the news in a big way. And so, I think I just love this conference. Every year it gets bigger and better. That's Labor Day weekend, everyone, which this year is September 2nd through 5th. Please check our website, which is writercon.com, WRITERCON.com. So our scheduled guest today was M.G. Crisci, who I was looking forward to talking to. He's a really interesting guy. He's written a bunch of books, and he's not here. And I don't know why. If he shows up anytime in the next, 10 or 15 minutes, or who knows, even longer, then I will talk to him. But if not, we're going to spin a whole new direction on it. It occurs to me, this is our 95th episode of this podcast. And who's the one author who's never been interviewed on this? Me, the 56th author host. So, absent Crisci, we may be doing that in just a little bit. But first, the news. Well, I pretty much already previewed this, but today's top story does in fact relate to Draft to Digital. This is the news everybody's talking about in the book world right now. Draft to Digital, a major aggregator or distributor of books, ebooks and print books for a lot of small presses and self-published authors. They're acquiring Smashwords, which may be the other best known entity that does more or less the same thing. So these two are going to combine and basically become this publishing juggernaut, which actually makes a lot of sense. These two companies are pioneers in the field. Smashwords did it first. Draft2Digital has a fantastic interface. I mean, publishing a book and distributing it could not be easier than they make it. And the books still turn out beautifully. And these two companies have been the key catalyst behind the surge in not only self-publishing, but small press publishing and regional press publishing, which once upon a time was almost prohibitively expensive because of the costs of warehousing and distribution and whatnot. Well, all that goes away, at least with respect to ebooks. And so now these two large entities are going to join. They're going to operate under the name Draft2Digital, which is headquartered in Oklahoma City, not far from me. Draft2Digital authors will gain access, though, to the Smashwords store. That's the one thing Smashwords may have that Draft2Digital does not. They've got an online storefront where they actually sell books. So Draft2Digital authors will get the benefit of that, whereas Smashword authors will get all the tools that Draft2Digital has to simplify print and digital publishing and basically drive themselves to greater success. I think it's going to be a good deal for authors. What do you think, Jesse?
Yeah, I mean, unlike when the big publishers merge and there's sort of
Right.
less competition for authors, I think this is more of a combining tools that authors need into one place versus two places. So that sounds good to me.
Yeah, well, it's going to eliminate a lot of duplication. I mean, as you know, I publish books and I had accounts at both, but this is just one less stop for me now because they're all going to be in the same place. Even still, they're not going to be anywhere near as large as the big five publishers. The big New York print they have ebooks too, but primarily print to bookstore connections. I'm wondering if one of the few things that is hard to compete with for anyone outside the big publishing houses is this tendency of bookstores to always order from Ingram, although they could get print books from Draft2Digital or Smashwords or any number of other places, but out of habit, if nothing else, I can't say it. Out of habit, they go to Ingram. I can't say that it's beneficial because Ingram has raised their prices many times recently and just announced they're about to do it again. I know why. Paper is expensive. We got supply chain issues, but still, I wonder if this might be the thing that finally nudges bookstores into looking at other ways of acquiring books that really aren't that complicated these days with the internet. We certainly do not want to see bookstores go away. Love bookstores, online and brick and mortar. But anything that's going to help authors, I'm in favor of. And I think this is going to help authors. Okay, story number 2. This relates to a great article by Orna Ross on the creator economy. And what she means by the creator economy is all the main means by which consumers are directly funding the work of creators, artists, writers, which really does represent a significant change in the way people do work. We've talked before about the fact that, like, this podcast is supported by a Patreon account. That's one way that people can support authors, join their Patreon campaign. People are doing Kickstarter campaigns now. Our mutual friend Barry Friedman distributes his work on Substack, which is another great way of getting things directly to the reader without a middle person, without. See, I didn't say middleman because that would be sexist, even though that's the term everybody uses, but no middle entity, perhaps. Yes. I should say. That's part of what, I was talking about in the first story that keeps the old guard in place, the feeling that you have to go through all these channels, all of which take money away from the author. If you can go direct from author to the reader, then that's more money for authors. And of course, I'm a little bit prejudiced because I am a author, but I think authors have historically been grossly underpaid. Corporations get rich, most authors don't. And yet, this whole publishing business would not exist if it weren't for the work of authors. So I think they should be compensated. Jesse, what do you think? Looked like a major paradigm shift to you?
I think anytime there are tools that allow people to make money that goes directly to them versus a middle entity is always good. Like the idea of having a middle entity made sense in a previous time period when everyone made money off it, but then when the middle entities start consolidating power, then the people who don't get helped are the people buying the thing and the people making the thing. So
Yeah, exactly right. All right, into the news. We'll post in the show notes the link, the URL for that article I just referenced, and some information about Draft 2 Digital 2. But there's still no MG Crisci, and I've checked my email. He's not furiously emailing me. He's not calling me. Is he calling you, Jesse?
no.
So
no calls.
I think our guest today is going to be the 30-year veteran of the publishing world with 56 books in print, about to be 57. But Jesse, you're going to be the interviewer. You had no idea you were going to be the interviewer, but wing it.
That's right.
There's probably something you've been dying to ask me, isn't there?
Well, listen, I've honestly always, as the editor of this podcast, I've always wanted to know your answer to your first traditional first question. So, like, if you had to give,
and by that you mean, one piece of advice.
One
for
piece
writers,
of advice.
What would it be?
Yeah.
I would say make yourself write every day, which I think is not too far off from what a lot of people say. But here's why. I realize that when most people are starting writing as adults, they're probably doing something else as well. You know, I was practicing law. I was a baby associate in a big law firm in Tulsa, your town. And being a trial lawyer is somewhat time consuming, even when you're not actually in trial. So I had to that was the only way it was going to happen. I had to make myself get up early and write for a couple hours before I went off to work. And anybody listening to this podcast is probably in a similar situation. You may be, maybe you've got a job, maybe you're raising children, which is probably even more exhausting and time consuming than being a trial lawyer, or maybe not. Maybe you're in a better place, maybe you're retired or whatever. But the point is, even if you don't have as much time as you'd like, if you'll just make yourself do it every day, eventually it will pay off. If you just write 5 pages a day, guess what? In 3 months, you got the first draft of a novel. And then you do the second draft and third draft. I'm not saying it's going to be that quick, but I am saying that those pages add up. I mean, theoretically, they're going to add up no matter what pace you do it at, if you do it. But it's so easy to find excuses. I'm tired. I need my sleep. I need my the laundry. The laundry needs to be done. Laundry seems really important when you know you should be writing. I'm just not in the zone. I'm not in the mood. I'm not sure what happens next and whatnot. It's so easy to make. And when you let yourself make those excuses, the book doesn't get done. And if you get too far away with it, for me, even if I've been away for a couple days, I have a real hard time getting back into it. It's not fresh in my memory. Your subconscious isn't working on it anymore. I mean, that's the other great thing about writing every day, that you find yourself having ideas when you thought you were watching a television show, but weren't really that interested, or you're in the shower, you're driving, and suddenly you realize, oh, that's what needs to happen next. That's what I need to add. That's because your subconscious is working on it even when you're not, but you're going to lose that if you don't write regularly. So I realize people have different schedules. You got to find what works for you. But make a schedule, make a commitment to that schedule, and then stick to it till the book is done. All right, there's my answer.
I want to say for especially for the listeners of the podcast, like for the brief this week on, I'm going to have to take his very long answer to that question and just grab like the first 15 seconds of it,
right.
Which will be a nice little teaser for everybody.
Write every day. That's all you need. Just
there we go. Write every day. like as a non-author, I have a technical question about drafts, like the
Hmm.
different drafts. Is it really like once you're done with the first draft, you wait until someone has gone through the entire book before you go back and then make draft two, or is it more of like a piecemeal sort of chapter by chapter sort of situation?
I think different people do it different ways, but I start at the beginning and I plow all the way to the end and then go back and start draft two. And I don't wait a week. I usually start the next day, but that depends I mean, I'm anxious to get it done. To me, the first draft is the hardest part. I've heard other people say differently, but I kind of enjoy revising. I think that's one of my strongest skills, refining and honing sentences so they read quickly and smoothly. But the first draft is, creating something out of nothing. There is nothing harder than that. And so it's a push, push, push to get through that to the part that I like much more. But I do recommend that people start at the beginning and finish a draft before you do any revision, because otherwise, if you stop, like you're saying, do a chapter and then think, oh, that I'm going to go back and make that chapter better, and no, that's not quite right, and you start perfecting page 5 and you never get to page 300 as a result. Or worse, you get to page 300 and you realize, I need to cut that first chapter that I spent a week and a half on. You don't really have a sense of what your book is until you've done at least one complete draft. So do one draft and then you can start adding and subtracting. And stopping midway, to me, that's like throwing out the clutch when you're still driving uphill. Don't do it.
For all of our non-automatic drivers out there.
Right.
Also, because I read like very large fantasy type novels or sci-fi, sci-fi series, and
Right.
like especially like say take Brad Sanderson for example. I know that he has both alpha and beta readers, and I know for a fact that he has to do like entire drafts first before he revises, because he actually released like the first version of the first book of one of his series, so you could see how much it changed. And I
Yeah.
haven't read it yet because like I don't know if I want to. Like I don't. Sometimes I don't want to know.
No.
Because like what if I like like one character better in the original version?
Right.
But I know from just like reading interviews with him and reading articles from his alpha and beta readers, like it is especially for something that is going to be multiple books that are almost a couple thousand pages each, like it is very hard for one person to keep track of all that kind of stuff. So you kind of
Right.
need people, you kind of need help being like, I don't think your magic system can work that way because you said this earlier, and they're like, oh yeah, correct, gotta fix that.
Right.
So
That was his first book, though. So he was probably, to a large extent, teaching himself to write.
true.
He may not do as much revision now as he did then. I'm in awe of the guys who do those 3-inch thick books and publish them. The longest book I ever wrote was the 6th Ben Kincaid book. That was Ben Kincaid was my first series
Oh, I know.
character, a young lawyer, lived in Tulsa like I did. No, but not that's just a coincidence, of course. Anyway, by the I'm getting more confident, and the plots are getting more complex as I go along. And the 6th one, Naked Justice, had lots of subplots and lots going on, and it was long. And I was being published by Random House Ballantine at the time, and my editor called and he kind of sighed and said, basically, after a long series of meetings, we have decided we are going to publish this book, but they never need to be any longer. And his complaint was not that the length made it boring or that the pace sagged. It's simply money, because
Mm.
paper is expensive. And the longer the book is the more it's going to cost to print. And their profit margins are based on, sales plus sales minus cost. And so they, in their mind, my book could have been 80,000 words. It didn't need to be 120,000 words. So end of story there.
I wonder if the model is going to be sort of a director's cut ebook versus theatrical version print book sort of situation, right?
It could be. I mean, page or word count doesn't even matter anymore. When you're reading an ebook, who notices? There was a big story this week. I won't say the name, but someone prominent in publishing said that for me, a novel needs to be 80,000 words to 100. And people said, why? Some of our favorite books were shorter. And they were, I talked about Fahrenheit 451 last time. It's maybe 50,000 words. It's a great novel, but it doesn't need to be any longer than it is.
Yeah, no, I mean, a story should be as long or as short as it needs to be. And that
Right.
will depend on the story you're telling. Some stories can be told very quickly. Some take, years. Uh, I mean, I
Absolutely.
occasionally, my Kindle has a weird glitch where occasionally I have it set to tell me how much more time remains in a chapter. And every once in a while, it just switches from that to time remaining in book. And
Hmm.
sometimes I really get my mind blown when I'm reading some of these large books, and it's like 32 more hours in book. I'm like, oh my god, how long is this book?
Yeah. That would be, well, that's another factor for me, probably why I'm not reading those long Wheel of Time type books, is
Ah, yeah.
because I'm not really a fast reader. I think I'm a careful reader, and too often I get distracted by thinking about the writer when I should be thinking about the story, like, oh, I can see what he did there, or I know what he's planting, or what a beautiful turn of phrase. I wonder if I can steal that or something. But it's a careful read takes longer, I guess.
It's true. And at being an author, it's hard for you to just like enjoy a book as a reader because you do it. Just like I can't enjoy listening to a podcast anymore. Just listening to it. I'm constantly my ear just picks up things. I'm like, oh, that's a bad cut, or like that person's clearly on Zoom, or why are there so many ums in this one? Those sorts of things.
Yeah, I bet that is a problem, because I've heard some pretty not pro sounding. They don't have you,
They don't.
obviously.
They don't.
So
Listen, I'm available, people. You can email me. But so this is one of your questions you ask, but I've always been
Okay.
curious about it because
Mhm.
every time I've edited one of your audiobooks, I'm always like, where did he learn about this new thing that is somehow
Mm.
involved in the murder? So like when you're researching sort of not the actual like murder itself, but researching the sort of the world uh of the story and like what new thing is happening in that world, like where do those ideas come from?
Yeah, it depends. But often some of the weird stuff in my books come. I don't really research. I don't go out on the internet and type in weird ways to kill someone or something like
I,
that.
I I
But
hope you don't, because you get in trouble for that sort of thing.
yes, you don't want the FBI checking your browser history. Uh, no, but I do read a lot, and including nonfiction. I think I'm not the only fiction writer who probably reads more nonfiction than fiction, just because you're too aware of what's going on in a novel. And I will make copies of things and stick in the file, and then when it's time to write the next, say, Kinsey Rivera novel, then I'll go through the file and say, that could work well in that. But I mean, it usually starts with a character and where I think Kinsey needs to go in this book, and then start building some kind of story around it. I was joking earlier in the podcast about the mirror effect in the cover having, well, now I'm just going to blow it, I guess. But a mirror is, in fact, the murder weapon in this book. And this being my 57th book, we were talking earlier, at some point it's becoming kind of complicated. Okay, how have I not killed anybody? What would be a possibly new and fresh way of, you just can't do. And then he pulled out a gun for the 57th time. That would be so boring.
I mean, but like on the other hand, though, isn't the the idea of a mystery thriller book is like it's how the murder gets solved, less like how the murder takes place, right?
I think they're both are important. This is my first book was published in 91. And pretty soon, because of this surge in interest in lawyers and courtroom dramas, people started calling them courtroom thrillers, including mine. And I thought, really? Because I never thought of it as a thriller. I loved the golden age mysteries and was trying to write a good mystery story and use what I knew about the law world, law firms, courtrooms, and whatnot, and use that as a valid setting for. But I don't think, I mean, I didn't even read thrillers. To me, thrillers were like Hitchcock and people with guns
Mm.
chasing each other. And I was really uncomfortable with that label. You may remember when we had Lisa Scotolini on the program, she said the exact same thing, and I was just like, my lips to your ears. And now, not too long ago, I read when his new book came out, John Grisham saying, I never really liked that courtroom thriller label. I'm writing suspense books, and I don't know where that came from. So,
Yeah, again, like the genres are just like they're ephemeral. They're like we need to call this something. There's drama in it, and it takes place in a courtroom. There we go, courtroom
right.
dramas. Even though I'm trying, like from the books of yours I've read, there's always like one court scene I feel like I remember
Oh,
in each
at
book, but
least,
it's not
yeah.
like it's very rare. It's very rarely you very rarely do the like L.A. law, crescendo in a courtroom situation.
Well, sadly, that's because I actually am a lawyer and I've actually tried cases. I say sadly because, it would be more dramatic to have, like you see on television, where people start shouting at each other in
Mm-hmm.
the courtroom and bickering and pulling wild. And but heart of hearts, I know that would never happen. That could never fly. So I try and find ways of making the story interesting, exciting, without doing things that just make my eyes roll. It's interesting me that sometimes I get here's one that I've gotten more than once. I've gotten letters from people saying, "Nice book, but uh, no judge that bad or that immature, incompetent could ever be sitting on the bench." And I just think, huh. Run that idea by some of the lawyers,
Yeah.
okay, and see what they say.
That was like, did you watch the Only Murders in the Building TV show?
Yes. Hmm.
Uh, yeah, so I think we've mentioned this before, but like the fact that they never once showed them editing the podcast just bothered me every time. I'm like, who are they farming that out to? You can't just like record it and send it out there. That's not how this works. Um, even though the
Yeah.
show was great.
Apparently, Martin Short did that in his bathroom or something, his soundproof bathroom or whatever. I
That's a terrible
thought,
room to soundproof. Tile
yeah.
everywhere. Tile is very reflective.
And they seem to have like thousands of listeners overnight.
Yeah,
But I guess
not
that's
how this
because they were
works.
doing a murder podcast.
That's true. Listen, if we could find a local murder to switch this into, I think we could definitely like quadruple our listeners.
I
Uh,
suspect you're probably right.
uh, oh, I was gonna.
So now you should ask if I'm a pantser or a planner. That's what I always ask people, right?
That's true, but I feel like you always answer that question for
Oh,
yourself when you do that.
okay.
I
Forget
think I
that.
think you
I'm a
do.
planner
Yeah, I mean, I feel like
in
you'd
all
have to be to
things.
organize a podcast that has like news segments and whatnot. You can't just come up with the news while we're talking. That's something I would do. Um,
I guess you could. Did you watch John Oliver that time they were talking about uh, what's the guy, the ultra conservative Rush Limbaugh,
mhm,
or maybe Glenn Beck, one of those guys, but showing his studio, and he had like a computer over here with the Drudge Report and some
mhm.
papers over here. It was really like he just sat down and started looking around for stuff to talk about.
Yeah, like I mean that. Listen, you can critique Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck all you want, and they deserve it most of the time. Freeballing for that long of time is very hard.
I can't
Like,
imagine. I would so run out of things to say.
no, I mean when we did our like 5 hour live stream for Pot for Good's anniversary, like we had new guests coming in, so that like freshened it up. But after a while, I was like, how long have I been talking? Like, what am I even saying anymore? But
Have I said it already?
yeah, I was like, have I already made that joke? That's really my biggest concern. Was like, did I make that joke already?
Hmm.
Um, Oh, I had a question for you. Now I'm trying to remember what it
Okay.
was. But again, here we're gonna switch up a little bit. For the people watching, like if you have a question for Bill, you can put it
Oh,
in the chat, and we will
right.
we will say it to them. This is fun. Um, do you going into a news story?
Hmm.
What is it that you know first about that story? Is it do you know who's going like is who dies the first part to you, or is it like the process of how the hero or heroine solves said murder?
Well, it's not that. Often I haven't solved the mystery until three or four drafts into it, or my solution keeps changing because I think, no, that's obvious, or that's contrived, or that would never work. I usually go in figuring out. I think I said this before. Where does the character need to go at this point? What needs to happen next? I did start, the Daniel Pike books that started with The Last Chance the Lawyer. I said, okay, I'll do another series, but 6. I will, and who knows, I might do more than 6 someday. I had a great idea the other day, but if I come back, it'll be because I want to. I'm committing to 6. And there was an arc, and, I knew where Daniel needed to be in each book to move forward to where I wanted him to be at the end of the 6th book. So that was the starting point. And then I start thinking, okay, what haven't I had before, and what would make for an interesting, who will he be forced to represent that would be massively uncomfortable?
You nailed that one. I feel like in that last Daniel Pike book, I was like, nice.
Yeah.
I was like, this is gonna be fun.
Well, that's happening to Kinsey in this next one too. The worst possible, but I'll talk about that later. So
I remember the question I wanted to ask you a second ago, which was, have you ever read a book that so either, like, I'm trying to describe without giving away what happened to me, that so engrossed you that the ending so angered you that you threw the book away, like you threw it away from your body?
Yes, I have. But that's, that's just me. Books, there is no book that was ever written that everybody liked. And some of that, I think, depends on where you are in your life. In my younger days, I mentioned Golden Age mysteries. I loved Agatha Christie and still do. I think she had the world's greatest talent for deception, for misdirection, for even when you read it and you think, wow, that's out there, but I didn't see that coming. And now sometimes I read them or go to the movies, like the one in the theater right now, and think, yeah, but what about, and what about, and I won't say it aloud because I don't want to spoil an ending for anybody. But every time, I start thinking, yeah, except that wouldn't work because the detective was, and it just spoils endings. So I'm not always the best judge.
I was gonna say, like, what, and I still love the book to this day. It just so angered me, and its ending was 1984. The first time I read 1984, I threw the book
Really,
away when
you wanted the happy ending, or what?
I guess I was I was in middle school, so I think I was expecting a happy ending, and it was the first time I didn't get it, and I was very emotionally confused by it. I was like, oh, he's gonna win, and he does not win, and that was a lesson my dad had to teach me. He's like, yeah, he's like that's life. Like this,
Yeah.
This is more likely than you rereading The Hobbit. I'm like, fine. So,
yeah, Winston Smith doesn't win, doesn't even come close, is it?
nope.
Turns
No,
out.
he loses in the worst possible way. It's really just heartbreaking. I feel like in a very important way, especially for a middle school kid. But man, I was really upset me the first time. All right, so we do have some questions from the chat. So,
okay.
let's see. So, KJ wants to know if you have read James McGrath's book, Tony Hillerman, A Life.
No, I haven't. I bet that's good, though. Is it?
Well, according to her, like apparently in one of Hillerman's rules for good writing is to use specific nouns, which is something you have mentioned before too.
Concrete, rather than abstract.
Yeah.
This isn't exactly what KJ's asking, but I met Tony Hillerman a couple times early in my career, early. In fact, he may be one of the first really big time mystery writers I heard speak. And, I came out of the English department, at college, and probably in my mind was expecting a certain degree of pomposity and erudition. And Hillerman was the nicest, most congenial, modest guy. And I remember very consciously thinking, that's the kind of guy I want to be. That's the kind of approachable writer that I want to be. I remember him saying he was reading some of his audiobooks, as I now have, and probably not the world's best audiobook reader, but they wanted him to do it, and he wouldn't do at that time they were doing abridged audiobooks, so you'd have to cut it down to something that could fit on 2 cassette tapes
I
or
was gonna say,
whatever.
yeah. I once saw Les Mis in cassette tape form. I'm like, my God,
Right.
so many
50
tapes.
of them. Anyway, he said, I can't do that. So somebody else does the script and they send it to me and I look at it and I can't really tell what they've taken out. I thought that is so modest. That's fantastic. While I'm on this vein, let me tell my other great early days as a writer story, also now sadly passed. I had a chance, first time I'd ever gone to New York, first as a writer, first time I was, never had any big deal writer thing. And I was with Sue Grafton and we were standing in line somewhere and talked. And now everybody knows Sue Grafton's alphabet books. And they may not know that her father wrote a couple of mystery novels. If I'm remembering correctly, he wrote a C.W. Grafton, a couple, I think maybe paperback mysteries. And she told me he always said he really liked that and he was going to get back to that, but he had to, he had to make a living. But when he retired, he was going to get back to writing. And guess what? He didn't quite make it to retirement age. And that's when Sue Grafton looked at me and said, Bill, don't wait. Because, of course, I was still practicing law at the time, too. And I took her word for it. And that's why I have 57 books in print now, or about to be 56. That's also why I might add the heroine in this current series of books I'm writing is Kinsey Rivera. That's a sort of tribute to Kinsey Mulhone, her character. It's spelled differently, but very much a shout out to Sue Grafton, who I thought was a wonderful person.
So 2 more questions we have are kind of related. And one is, do you have beta readers? And then part 2 of that question is, how detailed are your outlines?
I do have beta readers, and what a treat that is. How many? I don't know, 5 or 6, something like that. Laura always reads my books, and my daughter now reads my books, and she's about the least flattering critic you're ever going to get, but that's good, I think, in a way. And I have a handful of friends who read, and how blessed are you to have talented, good reader or writer friends who will take the time, actually read and comment on a book. I've already sent out, when I sent out Shameless, I had somebody who got back to me the next day, for Pete's sake. And I thought, wow, that's impressive. I don't know how many you need. I remember when Philip Margolin came out to the conference, which we now call WriterCon, one year. He said he had 10 beta readers, and his theory was that if only one person doesn't like it, that might be an outlier. But if like 6 say they don't like some aspect of the book, that's something you need to fix. And that's why he has several. I'm more insecure. If I hear one person say something's wrong, I'm going to go try and fix it. But that's just me.
I feel like you would want either people to love it or intensely hate it. Like, you want them to feel an emotion. You don't want them to be like, it was fine.
Yeah. Right. That's right. Yeah. What do the people say? Oh, it's pleasant, or
it's like, oh no, like you don't want pleasant, or I guess unless you're going for that.
Yeah, your readers will like it. I'm like, yeah, but did you?
Yeah,
you're the reader.
Yeah, it's like that's a double insult. I feel like someone says that to you as an author, like, oh, your readers will like it. So 1, that person's not one of your readers, and 2, they didn't like it, and they don't think much of you or your readers.
Yeah. I didn't have to mark much, which also still isn't saying that I liked any aspect
that's
of
a real
it.
passive-aggressive way.
Just means I've done it for a while. Yeah.
So the outlines question, like how does your outlining process work?
How detailed are your outlines? More detailed than you might imagine. But here's the, if you're doing your first book, don't get bogged down on the outline. I think you should do one, particularly of the middle of the book, because when people start writing, they usually know how it's going to start. They often know how it's going to end, but the middle is the problem. That middle 150 or more pages in the middle, to get from one place to another and not have it stagnate or become boring. not just be, and the detective goes to talk to another witness or whatever. That's really tough. So I would say make your outline as detailed as you can. But there have been times when my outline in the morning just said, Ben cross-exes the coroner or whatever, which really doesn't tell you what they're going to talk about, but it's at least enough that you can get started. The idea of the outline is that, you can look down and say, oh, that's what we're doing today. And you stay on track. You don't leave out any of the important elements. Read my book on story structure if you don't know what I mean by the elements, but you're going to map all that out in your outline. So it's all there. And you don't lose track of where the book is going because you've written it down somewhere. And so each morning, instead of spending an hour staring out the window because you don't know what's going to happen next, you see, oh, Ben's going to cross-examine the coroner. And then you can start thinking about what exactly is going to happen, but you've already gotten a launch point. So you waste a lot more time. I've also started every day when I write, I'll write my chapter for the day if we're doing a first draft or whatever. And then before I check it in for the day, I go back to the outline because usually something's emerged in the writing that day. And I'll think, oh, I planted this, so this needs to pay off later on in the book. Or I've just added some details, so let me write that down so I remember it, or so that becomes significant later on in the book. So even though I've written the outline before I started, it's not a static document. I continue to revise it and add to it and plus it and plump it up, every day that I write.
So that's actually, I feel like this is a great next question is like,
Mhm.
what do you like, George R. R. Martin is famous for that he writes the Game of Thrones books and on like a word processor.
Mhm.
Or no, I think it's like
I would hope so, yeah.
I think it's an MS-DOS program that he likes to use. Do you use one of the writing softwares like Scrivener or I can't remember what the other one was called?
There's one now called Atticus, which is, yes, Atticus, but that's similar to Vellum. But I think it has some of the functions of Scrivener. That's, I think its selling point is supposed to be a Scrivener plus Vellum. No, I bought Scrivener at one point because I wanted to hear what all the fuss was and I wanted to be able to talk about it, but I didn't quite see what the fuss was. I definitely write on a computer. I don't think I could do as much as I do as efficiently without a computer because that makes revision so much simpler than it was, simpler. Not meaning it's going to be simple, not meaning it's going to be easy, but it's going to be easier
Yeah.
and a little bit quicker. So yeah, I write on a computer in Microsoft Word, but
I was going to ask what program, like is it Word, or using iPage, using Google Docs?
No, well, Microsoft Word is the industry standard. I had to learn it because as a lawyer, we always used WordPerfect. Remember that? Am I dating
do.
myself now?
Listen,
And it didn't seem to me that Word was nearly as good, but it didn't matter because that's what won the war.
Yep.
And so that's even if you're not using Word, you're probably going to have to convert your work to Word, so you might as well write in that. But Scrivener, if that helps you, it has some functions so you can do a virtual outline. I don't find it that hard to just open another word processing document and write my outline in it. And it has places where you can file your research, which I can see how that'd be useful. But I think I already indicated, I still make copies of things, but I like that because I can then write on it. I can underline and circle things and make notes and whatnot. So I don't have anything against Scrivener. And if if somebody thinks it's useful, do it. But no, I don't do it.
I feel like if someone starts writing a book now in something like Scrivener, it'd be hard for them to try to just go back to where you have to sort of keep track and organize all of the documents yourself, Word version of writing a book.
Right. Well, it's also a famously not very intuitive program. Although I'm thinking of the first iteration, it may be better now. But I remember when it first came out, people were saying it's a great program, but give yourself a couple days to learn it. And I thought, I'd rather spend those days writing.
Now, KJ asked another question, which is an issue I also deal with, which is, do you save each draft under a different name? Like,
No, I don't. I probably should, but I don't. There have been a couple times I wished I had, but this has become a real issue for literary scholars. That once upon a time, when people were typing, or
hmm
even before that, writing by hand, we could see each draft. We can see Dickens' drafts, and as a result, we can see what he crossed out with a quill pen. And libraries, like the great collection they have at the TU library in Tulsa, has wonderful treasures, collections of authors' works, which are primarily going to be all the various drafts that led to some great masterpiece. And I fear that's not going to be existing anymore. I've donated some of my papers to the library at OSU, but I don't think there'd be anything to donate anymore, because I finish a draft and, like I said, start the next one, but I don't print it out. I don't ever print them out anymore.
well,
You
do you?
just
But
email
yeah.
them.
Well, if you save them, then they can just have the digital file, and people can pull that up if they want to, I guess.
That's right, and that'd
So,
be sensible, except that I would get confused, and I'd end up sending out my third draft instead of my 10th draft or something like that.
well, then like a data forensic scientist would have to look at the metadata of the file to see which one came before the other ones. Like, you can kind of do that sometimes. I know a little bit about that as someone who's like lost files, and I'm like, oh my god, which one am I looking for? Um, So, KJ asked if I guess in this case, audio editing and
Mhm.
video editing, do I save drafts under a different name? I do, but it's a very, part one, take two sort of situation. I do a lot with folders. I have a lot of things in different folders, uh, in during different stages of the process, because otherwise I'm going to forget that I did something to a file and then do it again, and then it's going to sound terrible, and I'm not going to know why. And that's happened to me before, and I'm like, I'm not going to let this happen again.
I always have had the kind of feeling, and maybe it's just me, that it might be time for you to start writing your science fiction or fantasy
Mm.
epic, Jesse. Am I
I
wrong?
I have listen. I have an idea of a story. I just, I just need to make the time and throw it down. See, I'm not. Maybe luckily for me, I am not someone who is afraid of a blank page. I'll just start throwing things on there
Mhm.
because I'm like, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it white, so I'll throw it on there. It'll just take a lot of revision work later, but that's a future Jesse problem. So
Yeah. Well, you're probably going to have some downtime on that cruise next week.
that's
Maybe.
true. That's true. Yeah, it's a perfect time to write a sci-fi stories on a Star Trek cruise. So
Is your wife encouraging this, or is she
the
not
cruise
so
or
much?
writing.
Oh, I'm going to assume the cruise is a good idea. The
It,
writing, I meant.
oh, you should love it. I mean, we've done some things together. Sometimes like we are very different. I'm, I guess, a pantser. Like, I'm happy to fly, but that's how my
Mhm.
brain works. Every time I try to outline, I get very sad, and it's like I kind of generally know where I think my big story is gonna go,
Yeah.
but like I know how it's gonna go, like book wise, like
Mhm.
where book one ends, where book two ends, where book three ends. But then I'm like, how do I get to all those points?
Right,
So
but that's why you outline, because nobody really knows the middle until you sit down and try and think it out, and that's the whole, writing. Th This is my theory of the real reason why people call themselves pantsers. It's not because that's inherently more creative. Maybe it is, I don't know, but I don't think so. I think it's just that writing outlines is a lot of work,
yeah,
and it reminds people of, like, high school English and having to turn in outlines, and it's drudgery, and they know how the book is gonna start, and they just wanna start. That sounds like way more fun until they hit about page 70, and they don't know what happens next, and then they abandon the project. But outlining is not fun. It does get easier with time, but it's never going to be easy. It's just something that I think you will be so glad you did when it's over with,
I
even
should
though
try.
it's.
I should try using every different writing program we've talked about to write the story and see which one actually is easier. That'd be a fun
Well,
experiment.
it'll all be tax deductible
That's right.
one day after you've sold your first big book.
Oh yeah. So I think that was a question I don't know if I've ever mentioned on this. Like, when are you allowed to call yourself a writer to thus then deduct
Mhm.
writing things from your
I
taxes?
think the
Like,
IRS rule is I let me try that again. The IRS rule is still, you got 5 years to turn a hobby into a business.
ah,
So you can deduct I'm trying to be a writer expenses for 5 years, but if it hasn't paid off in 5, then you may owe them some money. That's really a pretty reasonable, give yourself 5 years to do something, whatever it is you're going to. And if that's not working out, maybe try and do it a little differently, or try a different kind of book, or take up painting or something. But that depends on how seriously and how hard you're trying too.
That's true. I'm looking at you, George. Finish that book. So,
well, shall we wrap this up?
Yeah.
Did I make my
I feel like
point?
this went great.
Right every day, guys. That's going to be clipped at the beginning of
Yep.
this thing. And for me, I think it matters. Morning person, evening. Do it when you're most creative. I'm best in the morning, so I get up early and feed the cat and start writing. But the important thing is that you write every day. Okay, well, there's Jesse is just forcing me to mention WriterCon again by putting that graphic up on the screen.
It was in the script.
Yeah.
Our outline for the show, which we had to throw away half of without a guest. So
that's WriterCon. We have updated the website for 2022. That's writercon.com. And we have authors and agents and editors and book marketing experts and assistants, author assistants and gurus of all kinds, over 70 sessions, lots of chances for you to meet and network people. And if you register now, you can take advantage of the early bird price. So please come do it. Come out and meet Jesse and me. We would love to meet you. And what was that?
Oh, that was the air horn for WriterCon.
Does that designate excitement? Or
yes, that is it's a yay. It's like instead of claps, it's the air horn.
Cool. Let me also say that if you're writing or aspiring to write, and I'm guessing maybe you are since you're listening to this podcast, hey, come join our Facebook group, which is called Red Sneaker Writers. You can find us on Facebook. You can get my daily posts and updates. I also have a free Red Sneaker Writer newsletter that goes out every other week. And if you send me your email address, I'll add you to the list. My email address is willburn@gmail.com. That's WILLBERN@gmail.com. Email me and I'll add you to the list. All right, sneakers. Thanks for hanging in there with us today. Until next time, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.